Hello, and welcome to GrantsWorks August 2025 webinar titled Your Federal Grant Has Been Terminated. Here are your options and next steps. My name is Kelly Fraser, and I'm the lead grant consultant here at GrantsWorks. Due to video production issues, we are unable to share the original recording of this webinar. However, we are re-recording this presentation as part of our commitment to the GrantsWorks community. GrantsWorks is your grant consulting partner. Our services help organizations strengthen their capacity to compete for grants, secure funding for programs, services, and innovation, and integrate systems-based grant management processes into their operations. Our team has expertise in each area of the grant lifecycle, from pre-award prospecting and grant writing through post-award grant management and management consulting. Our team has also obtained and managed grants as a recipient, subrecipient, and pass-through entity. We also develop and deliver federal grant management training, one of which is currently rated 4.7 out of 5 stars by 920 learners around the world. We are an SBA-certified women-owned small business, and we provide clarity and deliver aha moments to audiences via in-person and online speaking, training, and podcasts. This presentation was developed by Kimberly Jackson, a grants consultant here at GrantsWorks. She has over 15 years of experience managing federal grants from a number of federal agencies, and her experience also includes grant accounting, as well as guiding grantees through termination. In today's presentation, attendees will understand key federal regulations concerning terminations. We'll explore your post-termination options for organizations that receive a notice of termination. We'll review the closeout procedures that still apply if your award is terminated, as well as what types of costs are allowable in the event of a termination. And we'll learn strategic recovery techniques to minimize your organization's risk. Federal grant terminations are governed by 2 CFR 200, also known as Uniform Guidance. We'll refer to these regulations throughout the rest of the presentation. These regulations include how agencies assess risk, enforce remedies for noncompliance, and determine the termination types. Regulations also govern terminations themselves, including written notice requirements, the effects on funds and activities, and the steps to take to close out the award, even when the award is terminated. Additional regulations also define which termination-related costs may be allowable as long as they are reasonable, allocable, and documented. We'll start with 2 CFR 200-206, which governs how agencies assess the risk that a grantee may become non-compliant with federal award terms and conditions. To do this, agencies review the organization's financial stability, audit findings, experience, and capacity. If the agency designates a grantee as high risk, that can trigger heightened monitoring or potentially termination in the future. High-risk status can result in additional terms and conditions or closer monitoring from your agency contact. If, under this monitoring, your organization is found to be non-compliant, your award may be terminated in the future. So, if your organization has been designated as high risk, it's important to implement proactive compliance procedures and conduct internal monitoring to ensure that you stay on track. Uniform Guidance also sets out remedies for noncompliance. These are the options a federal agency may take if your organization is found to be out of compliance with federal regulations or your award's terms and conditions. These remedies include less serious options before getting up to termination, and those options include imposing special conditions, withholding cash payments, disallowing costs, or suspending the award. If your organization is subject to one of these additional remedies, this is a warning sign to act quickly and correct potential deficiencies. If your organization fails to correct deficiencies, agencies may terminate your award in the future. There are 4 types of termination set out in the federal regulations. The first is termination for cause, which we've discussed on the previous slides. This is when your organization is found to be out of compliance with federal regulations or your award's terms and conditions, or fails to perform the required work. Terminations for cause are generally initiated by the federal agency. However, federal agencies and grant recipients may mutually decide to terminate the award, either in part or the entire award. Recipients can also initiate terminations in whole or in part, but please note that if the recipient proposes to partially terminate the award, the agency may still decide to terminate the entire award at their discretion. The final type of termination is for agency convenience. This is when funding priorities shift or external causes require the termination of the award. Please note that a recently released executive order includes a proposal to modify uniform guidance to make it easier for agencies to terminate due to changes in administration priorities. In the meantime, until that change to uniform guidance goes into effect, some organizations may receive amendments to their awards, changing the termination terms and conditions. It's also important to note that the termination regulations apply not only to prime awards that grant recipients receive directly from a federal agency, but they may also apply to subawards between a subrecipient and a pass-through entity. Pass-through entities may terminate a subaward for subrecipient noncompliance, just as a federal agency can terminate an agreement for the recipient's noncompliance. The pass-through entity and subrecipient may also mutually agree to terminate the subaward, or the subrecipient can initiate termination. However, please note that many organizations agree to additional requirements through the terms and conditions of their subaward, so it's important to read your subaward carefully to understand if your agreement includes additional terms. Common additions include minimum notice periods, such as 30 or 60 days, if an organization intends to initiate a termination. Your subaward may also include specific procedures for notice, as well as the closeout process. If your award is terminated for cause, it's important to be familiar with the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System, or CPARS. Federal agencies are required to report terminations for noncompliance through CPARS. These records become visible to all federal awarding agencies, so they can influence future funding decisions. Recipients can view their own CPARS entry and either concur or refute that information. If your award is terminated for noncompliance, it's important to review this quickly and complete an accurate and timely response in order to protect your reputation and future funding eligibility. Federal regulations also require notices in the event of a termination. The federal agency or pass-through entity is required to provide a written notice of termination. This written notice must state the reasons for termination, the effective date, and any required next steps or additional conditions. Agencies and pass-through entities are also required to have written procedures for objections, hearings, and appeals. The effects of termination or suspension include post-termination costs becoming unallowable unless they are expressly authorized. However, costs are allowable if they are properly incurred before the termination date and not in anticipation of termination, and they still would have been allowable had the award ended on time. Next, we have a real-world case study of a housing authority funded by the Department for Housing and Urban Development, which was cited for late audits and poor performance. This organization was designated by HUD as high risk and eventually led to a partial termination of their funds. However, the organization was able to come back into compliance, become designated as lower risk, and had their funds reinstated. This highlights the importance of ensuring your organization is compliant, even in the event of a partial termination. In this second example, an audit by the Office of the Inspector General at the Department of Health and Human Services found that a nonprofit was unable to document $2.2 million in their HRSA-funded expenses. As a result, the $2.2 million were disallowed, so the organization was not reimbursed for those expenses, and the award was terminated. This case study shows how robust record keeping is the key to compliance. Saving all supporting documentation for your expenses can not only help you avoid disallowed costs, but also prevent your award from being terminated. If your organization receives a notice of termination, it's important to act quickly. Read the termination notice carefully. Check for references to specific CFR citations, and identify any deadlines specified in that notice. Next, assemble your internal team. Bring together your program team, your finance team, and any internal or external legal counsel. Gather all award documents, particularly those that address the concerns outlined in the termination notice. And notify your program officer right away, particularly if you plan to implement a corrective action plan or appeal the termination. Finally, begin crafting your response by either developing your corrective action plan or writing your appeal. Your response options after termination include submitting a corrective action plan with specific steps your organization plans to take to address the concerns noted in the termination notice. You may also have the option to appeal if the agency has a process that applies to your award. You may also negotiate partial termination. If one area of your program was out of compliance, the agency may be open to continuing the other portions of your program. This requires careful negotiation. And if your award is ultimately terminated, begin planning to either transition or reassign your personnel and services to another award, if allowable. In our third case study, a university funded by the Department of Energy missed a reporting deadline, which led to a termination notice. That university appealed to the Department of Energy with justifiable circumstances explaining the missed reporting deadline. The university also finished the report and implemented a corrective action plan to prevent reporting delays in the future. As a result, their award was reinstated under probationary conditions, showing how quick action and attention to the concerns outlined in the termination notice can ultimately help you restore your funding. It's also important to understand the costs that are allowable in the event of a termination. Costs for goods and services that were incurred before the termination date are generally allowable. Administrative closeout costs are also generally allowable. Those are costs that are incurred after the termination date that are related to the closeout of the award. Organizations may also be able to recover costs to settle contracts and subawards, but it's also important to note that all costs, regardless of type, must be documented, reasonable, and allocable. Some termination costs will require additional justification or proof of efforts to reduce or offset the costs. Please refer to uniform guidance for more information. A recently released executive order titled Improving Oversight of Federal Grant-Making Procedures also raises new risk factors related to recovering indirect costs during the termination process. Even if your award is terminated, your organization is still required to adhere to the federal regulations that apply to the closeout process. Organizations are still required to submit their final financial and performance reports, dispose of any property or equipment acquired with award funds, return unused funds to the federal agency, and retain records for at least 3 years. Termination of the award does not absolve your organization of these closeout compliance responsibilities. In our final case study, we have a non-governmental organization that had been funded by the United States Agency for International Development. This NGO lost its funding when the agency was dismantled throughout this year. However, the NGO submitted thorough closeout cost documentation to recover those costs. 92% of their claims were approved, ensuring stability for the organization. This illustrates the importance of having an organized, compliant closeout process within your organization. If your award is terminated, it's not the end of the line for your organization. There are options that you can pursue to recover and rebuild strategically. We recommend conducting a post-mortem internal review to look at what went wrong and identify opportunities for improvement and to build up your organization for the future. Internal corrective actions could include updating your policies and procedures to better integrate federal requirements and training your staff on compliance. It's also important to keep up good relationships with your agency contacts in order to pursue your eligibility for future funding opportunities. That concludes the termination portion of this webinar. I also want to provide some information regarding GrantWorks training options. The Federal Grant Funding and Management Training Series is a 3-module training that takes participants beyond the basics and teaches you how to obtain, manage, and comply with your federal grants. This training program is also certified by CFRE, so you can use this towards your continuing education credits if that applies to you. Module 1 of this training focuses on the federal grant fundamentals, everything from the history of federal grants and the differences between acquisition and assistance awards, all the way through how to analyze your notice of funding opportunity. Module 2 focuses on the notice of award, award budget, and pass-through entity requirements, helping you identify how uniform guidance helps you manage a grant, how your organization can review and manage your budget, and ensure that your costs are allowable, reasonable, and allocable. And then Module 3 is our federal grants management section. That helps you walk through all the phases of managing your award in the post-award stage, from program and financial reporting through conducting your drawdowns, getting all prior approvals, and completing the closeout process. Access to that training series also entitles you to 3 really critical resources. We have a companion guide, a supporting documentation and cost allowability checklist, as well as the Ultimate Grant Workbook. GrantsWorks also provides monthly webinars, so if you enjoyed this presentation, please sign up for our future trainings. Our next one is going to be in September, and we'll focus on the differences between research and non-research federal grants. So we hope to see you there, and thank you so much for your attention.